Okay, impeachment is back. This is not a fringe idea or a symbolic gesture that disappears after a news cycle. 140 members of Congress just voted to move forward with impeaching Donald Trump again. That is not speculation. That is not rumor. That is a recorded vote by sitting lawmakers. As the 2026 campaign season begins to accelerate, the country is now facing the real possibility of another impeachment fight with massive political consequences. This vote did not come from the margins of Congress. It did not come from a handful of protest lawmakers trying to make a statement. Nearly one-third of the House of Representatives voted to advance impeachment proceedings against the sitting president. That alone makes this moment different from earlier attempts. It signals a growing willingness inside Congress to confront Trump directly, even knowing the political risks. The effort is being driven by Representative Al Green of Texas, who has been pursuing impeachment against Trump for months. On December 11th, Green forced the House to vote on his latest impeachment resolution. Procedurally, the House voted to table the resolution, meaning it was blocked from moving forward immediately. Democratic leadership joined Republicans to stop it. But that outcome masks the real story. 140 lawmakers voted to advance impeachment anyway. That number is significantly higher than similar votes earlier this year and represents a sharp increase in support. Green followed the vote with a forceful speech on the House floor. He accused Trump of normalizing political violence and argued that Congress has a constitutional duty to respond. He announced that he would continue filing articles of impeachment before the Christmas recess. His argument was direct. He said Congress cannot allow a president to create an environment where threatening violence against lawmakers becomes acceptable. This was not rhetorical flourish. Green is making a serious accusation that the president's words and behavior have contributed to a climate in which lawmakers fear for their safety. He argues that this crosses a line from aggressive politics into abuse of power. For Green and the lawmakers who supported him, this is not about party loyalty or messaging. It is about whether Congress will assert itself as a co-equal branch of government. This impeachment push is not new. Green has filed multiple impeachment resolutions during this Congress. One accused Trump of abusing presidential power by using the office to enrich himself and punish opponents. Another argued that Trump usurped Congress's authority to declare war through unilateral foreign policy actions. Those efforts initially gained little traction, largely because Democratic leadership feared political backlash. What changed was Trump's rhetoric. Over the summer and fall, his language became increasingly aggressive. He spoke openly about jailing political opponents. He framed critics as traitors and enemies. He made statements that suggested punishment for lawmakers who oppose him. While Trump often avoids direct calls for violence, he uses implication and suggestion in ways that his supporters understand. This pattern is often described as stochastic terrorism. The speaker does not explicitly order violence, but uses language that encourages it indirectly. By portraying opponents as traitors and existential threats, the speaker creates moral justification for harm without issuing commands. The result is an increase in threats and intimidation carried out by supporters who believe they are acting in defense of the country. Law enforcement has documented a dramatic rise in threats against members of Congress. Both Democrats and Republicans who criticize Trump have required additional security. Some have received death threats. Others have faced harassment campaigns. This escalation did not happen in isolation. It coincides with Trump's repeated attacks on institutions, lawmakers, and the legitimacy of opposition. Green argues that this environment is not accidental. He contends that the president is deliberately undermining a co-equal branch of government by encouraging hostility toward it. From that perspective, impeachment is not optional. It is the mechanism the Constitution provides to address precisely this kind of abuse. The December vote forced lawmakers to take a public position. Democratic leadership, including members concerned about electoral vulnerability, voted to table the resolution. Their calculation is that impeachment carries significant political risk, especially in competitive districts. They fear energizing Trump's base and repeating the dynamics of his first term. But the size of the dissent matters. 140 lawmakers defied leadership. This group includes not only progressives, but also moderates from swing districts. These are lawmakers who usually avoid controversy and weigh every vote carefully. Their decision signals growing pressure from voters who want accountability rather than caution. If impeachment articles eventually pass the House, the Senate will be forced to respond. Under the Constitution, the Senate must conduct a trial. While the Senate can limit the scope and duration of proceedings, it cannot simply ignore them. That creates a dilemma for Senate Republicans. Holding a real trial would dominate the news cycle and freeze much of the legislative agenda. It would require Republican senators to defend Trump's behavior publicly and on the record. It would expose internal divisions within the party. Refusing to engage seriously would create a different problem. It would look like a cover-up and reinforce claims that the party places loyalty above accountability. Most Republican senators are likely to vote to acquit, regardless of the evidence. Party alignment remains strong, and the political cost of breaking with Trump is high. During Trump's second impeachment, 7 Republican senators voted to convict. Several of them later retired or faced intense backlash. The lesson absorbed by the party was clear. Crossing Trump carries consequences. Yet the political environment has shifted. The 2026 midterms loom, and public opinion among independents is more fluid than it was during Trump's first term. If impeachment proceedings shift voter perception, senators in swing states could face a different calculation. Supporting Trump might become riskier than opposing him. Democrats are aware of this possibility. Their strategy is not centered on immediate removal. It is about shaping public understanding and forcing accountability. Impeachment hearings would bring Trump's behavior into sustained focus. They would require Republicans to take explicit positions. They would frame the election around standards of conduct and rule of law. This effort does not exist in isolation. It connects to a broader narrative Democrats are constructing about corruption and abuse of power. Allegations surrounding the Epstein files, accusations of institutional corruption, and concerns about misuse of public resources all feed into a single storyline. The claim is that Trump and his allies operate above the law and expect impunity. Impeachment becomes the sharpest tool in that narrative. It declares that certain behavior is unacceptable regardless of party. Even if the Senate does not convict, the process itself establishes a record. It signals that Congress recognizes a line has been crossed. Green understands this dynamic. He has been explicit that forcing votes and public debate is part of the objective. He believes that avoiding conflict has failed. Trump's behavior has escalated, not moderated. From Green's perspective, restraint has only emboldened further abuses. The coming weeks will be decisive. Green has pledged to file additional impeachment articles. Support within the House appears to be growing. Another major scandal or further escalation in rhetoric could push hesitant lawmakers toward action. If a majority forms, impeachment will move forward. At that point, the political system enters a pressure test. The Senate will be forced to act. Campaigns will revolve around accountability versus loyalty. Voters will be asked to decide whether Congress should confront executive overreach or accept it as normal. The larger question is institutional. Does Congress still function as a meaningful check on presidential power? The founders designed impeachment for moments when abuse threatens the balance of government. If that tool is never used or always neutralized by partisanship, it loses its purpose. Political violence is central to this debate. This is not about policy disagreement. It is about whether a president can create an atmosphere in which lawmakers fear physical harm. That strikes at the heart of democratic governance. Fear silences opposition. Intimidation undermines representation. Republicans often dismiss threats as isolated acts by unstable individuals. But language matters. When leaders frame opponents as enemies and traitors, consequences follow. Responsibility does not disappear because instructions are indirect. The Senate's predicament reflects this tension. Senators are trapped between alienating a powerful base and alienating persuadable voters. Many hope the House never forces the issue, but avoidance may no longer be possible. This moment will shape the 2026 elections. Democrats will argue they stood for accountability. Republicans will argue impeachment was a distraction. The outcome will depend on whether voters see impeachment as necessary oversight or partisan warfare. The risk cuts both ways. If impeachment is handled poorly, it could strengthen Trump by reinforcing his persecution narrative. If handled carefully, grounded in evidence and testimony, it could shift perceptions. Media coverage will be critical. Framing matters. Facts must remain central. The bottom line is simple. 140 members of Congress voted to impeach the president. That is a significant institutional signal. It reflects growing alarm about executive behavior and a willingness to confront it despite political risk. Whether this leads to removal is almost beside the point. Impeachment defines boundaries. It states what a democracy will and will not tolerate from its leaders. Al Green is betting that Congress still has the courage to draw those boundaries. The country is about to find out whether that bet was justified. If the House moves forward with impeachment, the political consequences will extend far beyond Washington. This fight will not stay confined to committee rooms or Senate chambers. It will spill into campaigns, fundraising, media coverage, and voter psychology in ways that could reshape the balance of power heading into 2026. One of the most overlooked aspects of impeachment is how it changes incentives inside Congress. Lawmakers are no longer debating abstract norms or hypothetical abuses. They are forced to take recorded votes that will follow them into election season. Every senator and representative must decide how closely they want to tie themselves to Trump's conduct, not just his policies. For Democrats, impeachment becomes a test of credibility. For years, many voters have believed that Congress talks about accountability, but rarely delivers it. When serious allegations arise, leadership hesitates, compromises, or waits for the moment to pass. That pattern has bred cynicism. Voters see outrage followed by inaction, and trust erodes. This impeachment push challenges that pattern. Even without a guaranteed conviction, it signals that some lawmakers are willing to use the powers they were given, even when the outcome is uncertain. That alone distinguishes this effort from symbolic resolutions or press conferences that lead nowhere. At the same time, Democrats face a risk they know well. Trump thrives on conflict. He frames opposition as persecution and uses institutional resistance to rally his base. Impeachment feeds directly into that narrative. Every hearing, every vote, every headline becomes evidence, in his telling, of a corrupt system trying to silence him. The difference now is context. Trump is no longer an outsider battling entrenched elites. He is the sitting president accused of abusing power. That distinction matters, especially to voters who supported him for disruption, but not for instability. Impeachment reframes the story from rebellion to responsibility. For Republicans, the danger is fragmentation. The party is held together largely through discipline and fear of retaliation. Primary threats, fundraising pressure, and media backlash have kept dissent minimal. But impeachment forces a choice that discipline alone cannot resolve. Silence becomes complicity. Defense becomes endorsement. Some Republicans will attempt to walk a narrow line, condemning violence in general terms, while refusing to hold Trump accountable for creating the conditions that fuel it. That strategy may satisfy party leadership, but it risks alienating voters who see the contradiction clearly. Independents, in particular, respond poorly to perceived dishonesty. They may not follow every procedural detail, but they understand evasion. When lawmakers avoid addressing obvious cause and effect relationships, trust collapses. Impeachment hearings put those evasions under a spotlight. Another critical factor is testimony. If impeachment proceedings move forward, they will not rely solely on rhetoric. They will include witnesses, Capitol Police officials, intelligence analysts, constitutional scholars, and lawmakers themselves may testify about threats, security risks, and the impact of presidential rhetoric. Those testimonies personalize abstract arguments. A lawmaker describing threats against their family carries more weight than a legal memo. A security official describing resource strain caused by escalating threats reframes the issue from politics to public safety. These moments shape public perception more than speeches ever could. Trump's response will be predictable but effective. He will deny responsibility, mock the process, and accuse opponents of staging a coup. He will flood the media ecosystem with counter-narratives designed to overwhelm attention and exhaust critics. That tactic has worked before. The challenge for impeachment supporters is discipline. They cannot afford mixed messages or exaggerated claims. Overreach would hand Trump exactly what he wants. The case must remain focused on evidence, patterns of behavior, and constitutional responsibility. Emotion must support facts, not replace them. Timing will also matter. Prolonged proceedings risk fatigue. Rushed proceedings risk appearing careless. Leadership must balance urgency with deliberation. Too slow, and momentum fades. Too fast note, and credibility suffers. Behind the scenes, donors and strategists are already recalculating. Impeachment reshapes fundraising appeals. For Democrats, it becomes a rallying cry for accountability. For Republicans, it becomes a test of loyalty. Money will flow accordingly, amplifying polarization. Media framing will likely determine whether impeachment breaks through or stalls. If coverage focuses on partisan conflict, public attention may drift. If coverage emphasizes evidence, testimony, and institutional stakes, engagement will deepen. The difference lies in editorial choices, not facts. Another underappreciated effect is normalization. When extreme behavior goes unchallenged long enough, it becomes background noise. Impeachment interrupts that process. It forces a pause, a reckoning, a moment where behavior is evaluated against standards rather than normalized through repetition. This matters beyond Trump. Future presidents will be watching. They will learn what consequences exist for crossing lines. If impeachment is avoided out of fear, future leaders will push further. If impeachment is used thoughtfully, even without removal, it reasserts boundaries. There is also a generational dimension. Younger voters have grown up in an era of constant scandal and limited accountability. Many believe institutions are incapable of self-correction. A serious impeachment effort challenges that belief, for better or worse. Failure to act would reinforce cynicism. Action, even if imperfect, signals that mechanisms still exist. That perception could influence turnout, engagement, and trust in democratic processes. Ultimately, impeachment is not just about Trump. It is about whether democratic systems respond to stress or yield to it. It is about whether power is constrained by norms or insulated by loyalty. It is about whether fear of political consequences outweighs fear of institutional collapse. As this process unfolds, one thing is certain: neutral ground will shrink. Lawmakers, media outlets, donors, and voters will be forced to choose interpretations of reality. There will be fewer places to hide behind ambiguity. The coming months will reveal whether this moment becomes another chapter in political stalemate or a turning point in congressional assertiveness. Either outcome will leave lasting marks on the political landscape. Impeachment is not guaranteed to succeed. It is not guaranteed to fail. What it guarantees is exposure. Exposure of arguments, motives, alliances, and limits. And exposure, in politics, is power. This second phase of the impeachment fight will be louder, messier, and more consequential than the first. The votes already cast ensure that. The question now is not whether the issue fades, but how deeply it reshapes the path to 2026 and beyond.